E hika mā tēnā tātou katoa. Nau mai haramai ki tēnei kawenga kōrero hou. E ki ana ko Turanga Health is Wealth. Welcome to this, our first of a podcast series called Turanga Health is Wealth, where we will dive into all the things that make Turanga Health, our local hauora Māori provider here in Turanganui Kiwa, what it is today. The kaupapa they provide, the whānau who receive them, and everything in between. Who better to kick us off than the man at the helm? Actually, you're probably more likely to see him at the back of the waka than the front, doing all the mahi, doing what it takes to get everything done. And it's obviously served him well because he's still in the hot seat at least 25 years later. Joining me today on our first episode of Turanga Health is Wealth, CEO of Turanga Health, Reweti Ropiha. Kia ora.
Ai, kia ora. Te orangatira. Ai, kia ora.
So was hauora always something that you wanted to pursue, or was it more of a push in that direction?
Yeah, to be fair, I had no background in hauora, to be honest. The learnings, I'd sort of pushed on from Lytton High School and on to Waikato, and my background was more in sort of business. Then I went overseas, spent some time there doing the OE, and I come home to help the old lady look after the old man who was unfortunately was going through Alzheimer's and Parkinson's and all those sorts of things. So that was the introduction. It was a hard school introduction to hauora. And then probably the timing was right. I was there, and those who were at the helm had made a sort of discussion point around the setup of Turanga Health back in the 90s. And probably the manifestation for me was when we looked at the hauora lens or kaupapa was all about the Muriwai sort of spaces. So it was all about well-being, not so much around the disease state. So once we embedded that sort of whāraki, it allowed a wider lens back in the early days. And it's probably a kupu that's thrown around left, right and centre, the well-being spaces and all those sorts of things. But that was right at our genesis, right back in the 90s. But yeah, that's how it came to be.
What does it take to create an environment where our whānau feel healthy, they feel like they can walk in the door, and then does that then create the sense of wealth we talk about? Yeah.
I think I can't expand on that further than sort of reminisce on the upbringing that I was fortunate to have had. It's whangaid by grandparents and brought up in the centre of the universe is Mantuki and Muriwai. And that's held well, the learnings of yesteryear and all those manifestations. And as we've sort of walked through the timelines, it's trying to keep things simple, trying to keep things that are relevant in the spaces that whānau have to get on with making things happen. That's bode us well to, the privilege of always going into someone's whare, the notion of reciprocity that, you always go in there with something to make a difference with the whānau. And it's a preparedness to think a bit laterally, not sort of playing quicksand and all those sorts of things, stretch a rubber band, all those sorts of things. But the prerogative was also around that keep whānau in a space where they could stand on their own 2 feet. And so we were only a jigsaw piece to make that stuff happen. That's what I can say is, I've had the privilege of grandparents being at the helm, sharing all those sorts of things. And so those are good learnings that have with the appetite to make those things happen.
So the vision is taking hauora to the people. Where do you see the value in that?
Those sweet spaces, it always keeps you on notice. The sacrosanct spaces. Yes, we have the obligation space as who we are as tangata whenua, and we need to embody, you and I, the manifestations of our learnings of yesteryear, but also that real-time currency of it's always a privilege to enter someone's whare. So that's always got to be at the front, because that door can quickly remain shut as it gets open for you. So, and we all know our whānau don't live their life Monday to Friday, 8 to 5. We've got to have the tolerance to afford us the space to go to, whether it's shearing sheds, broccoli paddocks. I look at all the primary industries. My upbringing was all around fencing and all those sorts of things. And you look at, all the labourers and all those sorts of, who are they predominantly? Predominantly Māori, predominantly Pacific. And so the expectation was, how could we change up the hauora spaces to shift it from a Norman Road sort of setting, a hospital? What do they specialise in? They specialise in bed nights. GP practice, outside of a 15-minute consult. The space that we wanted to do was to shift into where whānau live, learn, work and play. And then embody that space of it's always a privilege to go through the front or the back door. So shifting those spaces to where whānau are pono and tika, that allows them the comfortable space, and then we could engineer the conversation. And then through the kōrero, the conversation, we could then open up the realm, have a stronger connection with the whānau, then talk around other things that we could potentially put at their fingertips, or at least put them in a sweet spot to make an informed decision. So the choice was always theirs. Our role was to hopefully squeeze that knowledge void, but put them in the position where they still have the ultimate choice.
I guess it's an approach that's helped to break down barriers. So in your opinion, what have some of those barriers been? They're multiple.
We've been fortunate enough now, I think we just had our AGM last night, so it was our 29th AGM, so we've been around for a while. And you can see the changes through the generations as they've been coming through. Our biggest sort of, our demography here in Tairawhiti are effectively strong cohorts of baby boomers, and you've got millennials. Back in the day, a strong sort of presence was kanohi. That was face to face. People wanted to see your eye whites and they wanted to have their relationship. The generations have changed. A lot of it now is more faceless. I sort of want to not so much be more direct, they want to be indirect. And so the virtual spaces have sort of eclipsed kanohi, especially for the millennials. So is that a barrier? Well, it puts you on notice because you have to effectively shift and embody other forms of communication. So, that puts you on notice around real time, all those sorts of things, which are, it's a different realm. Heaps of differences around social determinants. So we believe of anyone's health journey or hauora sort of journey, 80% of it's going to be determined by social determinants. And what do we mean by that? Housing, jobs. You've had the COVID days, the cyclone days, and all of those erode around opportunities for work, opportunities around housing. You and I will know, if you jump back in the time portal, you went back about 20 years ago, there might be one or two who would have been on the streets looking for, asking for potentially monies and all those sorts of things, or having crisis around home. So you advance 20 years' time, unfortunately, that's where we're at. So, people will say, that's the impact of globalisation, where you've got us now bound by what's happening in the global times. But those are reality checks. And so, the tolerance for us is that, it might be a barrier. How do you swing it, though, to be an opportunity?
You can only fund so much. How do you prioritise what you're doing? Is it needs-based?
Yep. No, good question. We're not there to appease everybody. So, I mean, we're fortunate enough in our setup. So, the three iwi, Ngai Tamanahuru, North Whakāta and Mahaki, they were courageous in those initial conversations to set up Turanga Health as a company, $100 each to set us up. So we're bound to ensure that our presence in those backyards are still sort of connected. So we've got to do that. And then we're also bound by the whānau who give us trust and confidence as our enrolled service user to assist them in their wellness sort of hikoi, to engineer a space where they could, give us a two-finger salute and get on with life and allow that to flourish. They're not things that are, sort of the sweet spot is not just through monies and contractual monies. We look on the value sets of things like reciprocity and all the learnings of yesteryear that, our grandparents, great-grandparents live and died by. So we want that to be part of the engagement. So it's not a transaction. We're not there just to do this and then catch you later. We want to put our community on notice as well. So, things like civic duty and how we can package that up to be part of the experience. So rather than just be dependent on government resourcing, we want to add value. So what are some examples of that? We've got good relationships with orchardists who allow us their second picks for the apples and the oranges and all those sorts of things. So, we've had good relationships with the forestry gangs around things like firewood that we know that can make a fundamental difference. We don't have to go to MSD or government departments to allow that space to happen. I think it's that stuff that comes off your forehead, a bit of sweat equity, a bit of nous. And so we want to package that up so that, we're not benevolent to the powers that be here in Wellington.
How much of what you do is about convincing others? You talk about contracts versus actually just getting shit done.
Yeah. It's, your sweet spot is the multiplicity of those kōrero, those conversations. One day we could be talking to a Prime Minister or the Minister of Finance. The very next day you're talking to 5 shearers. You know what I mean? And the subtleness of conversation, the preparedness to, because either of those audiences, they know if you're bullshitting or, the ngākau is not quite sitting right. You might have all the jargon, but, you'll see in a space of silence, where you've either intrigued the notion of being inquisitive, or you've confused every bugger who's sitting in the room. So, the art of conversation to have influence, she's pretty spot on. There's where your litmus test is, to shift from a young mum with 3 tamariki or to a queer who's got 6 mokopuna in the room, to a marae chairperson, to a high school chairperson. The audiences are multiple. And so each time is when you're going in, it's a new event, it's a new day. You can't aggregate the same audiences, the same faces. And people know that, So, and that's the beauty of the backyard. That's what it's all about. And having that prerogative that, okay, I've got to go and you've got to go and you've got to go to front. You can't hide behind a label that has all your name and it's got all these sorts of things there. It's that's the notion of the of kanohi.
Let's talk a little bit about your kaimahi. Just like the marae, the front don't work without the back, and vice versa. What kind of culture have you created at Turanga Health to ensure that they're getting up every day and willing to go out of their way, extra hours, things like that, to help keep things rolling?
Yeah, it's a it's not a static space. It's we're fortunate enough to have a good kaimahi who are across. Many of them come with tacit skills, so they've learnt them in the back of the marae, or they've been in the weeding gang. They've been fleesos. They've been the multiplicity of the skill sets, or the lived experience from doing the do. and you have another percentage who have got your explicit sort of skill sets. They have ventured out to university and, done those sorts of things. It's a space of embellishment. How do you bring those together so that flicker of that flame is still the driver that gets you to do things? And so we try and realise a back room that allows that space so we can have their backs. You don't want to put kaimahi out into settings and they engineer some sort of insight, but we're not in a position to have their backs. So we want kaimahi who appreciate that, okay, the organisation we work for does have our back. And then you've got to own all that baggage that will come with that. So you need to free up your architecture. So some might start at 10 a.m. Some might come in if it's daylight savings like what we got now. It might be later starts, all those sorts of things. Working on a Saturday, working on a Sunday, it might be that you're not here on a Monday. Because those days and those times afford us the ability to interact with whānau. And so, having a workforce that, you invest in, that also what you may ask of your workforce to do, you yourself have done. You can't be expecting those to do those things where you can't get off your ring piece and do the same sort of thing as well. So, yeah, mate, that's how we try to gel those sort of sweet spots. Nothing's perfect, you know what I mean? I'm not here to say we're the perfect sort of workplace, but these are the sort of instruments that we try to design a culture that allows us to flourish. I look at the COVID sort of days, I think I've done another sort of kōrero. There were 3 months there, we never had a day off. We went every day. Bang, 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 bang. The cyclone came, hit us on that Monday. We were open on that bloody Tuesday, And a lot of the architecture was knocked over. They couldn't do anything. But our kaimahi were there. Even one or two of them who lost things, they were there. We want to manifest those learnings so they're just not parked up with events of a crisis. Yeah. We also want those in days where we can celebrate success and all those sorts of things and shift those learnings into our BAU, into our business as usual. But it's pretty important for us to have a good sort of workplace culture because it allows us fingers on the pulse.
At last count, you service around 3,000 whānau. Could you do more if you had more? Would you like to?
It's the, so we've got a user base, which is, those are our active users. And then outside those spaces is all the rōpū who effectively, they're in that space of Muriwai. They don't need to be part of the case management. So it might be just a leg up in a couple of cases, or they're part of a kapahaka rōpū or a marae sort of setting. So we want those relationships to nurture and foster so that they don't become part of the case management. So they're a way of sort of flourishing. Is the utopia that we get more resourcing and all those sorts of things? It'll help. Look, our sort of litmus test is of those 3,000. As soon as they come in, we don't want them to be there forever. So we work hard to get those 2 finger salutes because there's another cohort of whānau who are in the same sort of position. So the more we can transition in and transition out, the more better. Could we service more whānau? Oh, look, I think fantastic. Yeah, of course we could. Would size and expanding out be the answer? Our sweet spot, we've always said, is the whare and the kāinga. Those are our sweet spots. So, I'm not a big believer in bricks and mortar. I think putting the instruments in the mātauranga at the fingertips of the whānau, those will be your ultimate navigators.
You talked about 29 years of Turanga Health, of which you've been around for the majority of those. So how do you measure success?
Yeah, no, good question. I think we're very lucky. We've got a strong cohort of kaimahi who have been there 20 years plus, probably about 40%. So, when we're talking about things like vibrant sort of workplace culture, you can attribute that straight away to those who put their hand up. So that's one. The other one is, we've got kaitiaki or our board, again, who have been there for many a time, and give us the space to go and execute and play in. So, if you've got that space, then you can, improvise and put things on and generate the good mahi Turanga Health does. The fortitude of making a difference either in those kāinga and those in the whare sort of spaces, that would be your other measurement of success. The many a whānau over the generation that we've been able to, so they're not there forever, and just make those slight sort of adjustments too. So, our whole sort of fundamental essence is about that whare is our sweet spot. So we've been able to maintain that mantra for 29 years now. So yeah, irrespective of governments coming through, whether it's been Labour, whether it's been national, whether it's been co-joint sort of governments, we've been able to maintain that essence, that sweet spot. The other one is the multiple faces. So what I mean by that is your young mums, whānau with special needs, your mental health, kaumātua, solo mums, all the permutations as whānau present to you. So we've been able to explore those sorts of spaces and put up pivots that allow us to shift into those domains. So it's not the space of aggregation where we're all the same. Yeah. Everyone comes with that space of being different. So, that's probably another sort of key measurement for us, is that we haven't stayed in a safe zone. We've been able to go out and do things differently. We've explored other relationships. So relationships aren't just our traditional relationships, just with our shareholders. With our 3 shareholders, we've been able to shift out and be part of other sort of settings. I talk about the Matawai, the Medical Institute, the one down St Mary's. We talk about with the Vanessa Lowndes sort of trust and whānau with special needs. I mean, the multitude of relationships. We could go from Matawai through to Muriwai, and those relationships would still be adding on, over the years. A measurement of success is, they are here in our backyard. They're not national bodies. They're not from Invercargill. They're not from up Auckland. They're sweat and tears of the ones in our backyard. And they're multiple. Marae, workplaces, kohanga reo, kora. Oh man, that list goes on. And, the probably the biggest one for me is the faces. They are the faces. These aren't, they're not through 29-page MOUs. These are salt of the earth sort of faces, for them, when we talk about tika and pono, this is handshakes and a hongi and a high five, and that's your metric of a measurement. What you say you're going to do, that's how they back you, you know what I mean? And yeah, those are the equity you have in your back pocket, but it always puts you on notice around reciprocity and those sort of the virtues and the value sets. You can't just go to the H.P. Williams library and pull that off a bookshelf. Those are generational, being passed down. So a measurement of that sort of space, there's our litmus test. Yeah.
Do you think Turanga Health has evolved enough? Is there anything that, if you could do, you'd want to do to move it into the future?
Yeah, that space of evolution, man, it was we've gone through, it hasn't been like a flat road. We've had to go through the Waiweka Gorge a few times with the curves, a couple of hills. If not through there, go through the whararatas, same sort of curves and all those sorts of things. It's, we've looked to, if there's a space of sustainability that we want to maintain, it's definitely the value sets and the virtues. So we've held sort of constant in that sort of space. And it's it's bode us well when we've done things like we've taken over the GP practice in Tikaraka. We had to afford ourselves to go to other whānau audiences who were not necessarily coming through our front door. So we had to deal with the cockies and the farmers and own a bit of baggage that they would have had. But we went there and now it's sustainable. The Venezuelan sort of trust we had to convince others to come in, evolve our thinking, to have relationships with others, and then potentially be in a space where we're now at the mantra driving all those sorts of things. We've had, probably the biggest challenge for us is definitely around the generational shifts. The millennials are definitely coming with a different expectation, which is a good experience. And we've had to pivot ourselves in these virtual sort of spaces. So, the age-old turning up and, you always bring something with you through the front door to maintain that relationship. So, Jesus, how do you do that when it's faceless? Yeah. But that's a space that we've got to engineer and work towards. Having the things around that global pandemic, that would have either knocked us for six or sunk us or brought us to a space where we could flourish. And when I look at that space, I spoke of that 3 months when we were there from the Harry Barker to Waihirere to the Mantuge Domain, the Muriwai Hall, the St. Mary's spaces, when we opened those gates for the community to come through. We didn't have drafting gates. They came through. And for us, straight away, we were able to evolve in a space where if we didn't evolve, we would all be at risk. Cyclone is probably another one. The space of evolution is, did we have the spine to open the next day on that Tuesday when the architecture around you were based on 0800 numbers, the power was out, all those sorts of things. Did we have the spine to open the next day? And we did. And so that was, again, another tier of evolution. We were reminiscing the other day around, we've now, well, all I can reflect on, I was at school C maths, so I'm still on those things around fractions where you've got numerators and denominators. And for Turanga Health, the evolution is not as a numerator, we're potentially the denominator now. We're a space of being constant. And I look at some of the reform and all those sorts of things that are going on. When you look at the backyard, if there's a space that's constant, it's Turanga Health. So the evolution for us to generate a level of comfort is to move into those sorts of spaces. We can't be on the sidelines watching with a pair of binoculars anymore. We're at the front end doing the do. And so in doing the do, that's where the evolution spaces shift us towards. But yeah, mate, that's probably, we're immersed in our community. We've had the fortitude to shift us into research so we can understand the impact of the things that we do. Are we good stewards of a privilege of having taxpayer money so we can punch to the government that, hey, look, your investment in us is a good investment, let alone have the trust and confidence for whānau that are these buggers, can we trust them? Will they do a good job for us? All those sorts of things. So, that space of evolution has generated us a level of comfort where we've got to stand up. We can't be on the sidelines and criticising every other bugger. We're at the front end now. And that's a good space to be in. We're waving the flag, you're still on your own 2 feet. We are the governors, we are the directors, we're at the forefront of decision making. And that was always the aspiration that on that 29-year hikoi, that we would be in that space. We're not the servants of, we are now the steward.
An awesome place to leave it, I think, Reweti, doing the do. And may I say, congratulations on, getting this far. And, some may say the approach is unorthodox at times, but... she's unorthodox, that's all good.
But as you say, method, measure, and that's the relevance. I mean, geez, we helped out the other day with a sea company sort of fundraising, all those sorts of things, and it's a space of relevance. And so if whānau are turning up in their droves and all those sorts of things, there's your notion of authenticity. There's your trust and confidence. So you sit there and you listen to the noise, or you back your backyard and you do the things that we do. Fantastic.
Kia ora. Thank you very much. That's us for our first episode of Turanga Health is Wealth. Be sure to look out for our upcoming episodes that will stretch out over the next few months. But from us here, no ora mai, kia ora tātou katoa.